Okay, so welcome, Nat, to the Engage Nation podcast. Great to have you on. Big fan. I think I was 10 years old at the Sydney 2000 Olympics. That's supposed to make you feel good, not bad, I promise.
Thanks, Callum.
We're going to cover a fair few topics today. But first off, for those that aren't as indoctrinated as I am, tell us a little bit about your background. That'd be great. Your career to begin with.
Well, first of all, you were 10, so that's good. A lot of the kids I talk to today, and, you're not a kid, but they weren't born when I won my Olympic gold medal and had my moment of glory that I've continued to stretch out for at least, 23 years and going, right? I'm going to take it to my grave, and no one can ever take that Olympic gold medal moment from Bondi Beach. 25th of September, 2000. In Sydney was pretty special. So that's obviously the culmination of my career. We don't have enough time to go back to once upon a time I was born in, but it started in Townsville, and my mum was an infant swim teacher and my dad played semi-professional football for Crystal Palace. So I guess I was sort of destined to be in something sporty, and I actually thought it was going to be swimming, to be honest. I was a pretty good breaststroker, and my role model was Lisa Curry from the 1982 Commonwealth Games. And that was the journey I started on to wanting to be an Olympic gold medalist. I saw Lisa Curry win the 100 metres freestyle in that 1982 Com Games, and I said, I want to do that. I didn't know how. I thought it'd be swimming. And then, of course, life always gets in the way and opportunities come and go. And I took the volleyball opportunity, and of course it took me to 5 Olympic Games, and I'm so grateful for everything. So that's a little bit of a nutshell. And you Googled me a lot. So if you want to know more about that, just have a Google. Fixes everything.
It does. It's helpful, and the guest is known across many sporting circles. So but you touched on it for a second there, 5 Olympic Games. That actually, you were the first Australian woman to do that, which is pretty amazing. I'd love to hear about, from a longevity perspective, how you did that. I mean, not just from a physical standpoint, which is probably what everyone thinks of first, but mentally getting up for 5 years, for 5 different Olympic Games. Tell us about it.
Yeah, with 3 different Olympic partners too. So it wasn't the same one. I had Kerry Potthast first for the first 2, which is probably, the most successful iteration of my career, with a bronze medal in Atlanta and a gold medal in Sydney. And then, so changing partners is quite the challenge. You think it's simple, but when you're in a 2-person team where you ultimately alternate who touches the ball, it's a very intimate relationship of trying to make yourself the best athlete you can be, mentally, emotionally, physically, and then them as well. So how do you uplift them, especially when they're challenged, and keeping your eye on your own game? Because sometimes I would lose my focus and try and help Kerry or Tamsin or Nicole, and then I'd turn around and I'd be making mistakes. So it's quite this interesting balance. But people ask me what's the highlight of my career, and obviously the gold medal is it, but it's very close to it, is getting through 5 Olympics. We see most athletes go to 1, rarely go to 2, and to go to 5, it really comes back to that analogy of how do you eat an elephant, and it's 1 bite at a time, it's 1 day at a time, it's 1 tournament at a time, and 1 Olympic cycle at a time. So even though I've retired, my life still goes and my brain still thinks in Olympic cycles, which is every 4 years. And then, of course, COVID comes along and makes Tokyo a 5-year cycle and screws up all the maths. But the bottom line of that is we break our 4-year cycles down into 1-year plans, and competition cycles, which are about 3 months, and then, of course, training and prep and all of those things. So it really is 1 bite at a time, 1 milestone goal, and then, of course, you've got Olympics, you've got World Championships. For some sports, you've got Com Games. The Winter Olympics are in there, Youth Olympics for people's cycles, and once you piece all that together, I'm a big obsessive compulsive planner. So I really like to understand the runway, what's coming, why we're entering certain events, why we pull out of certain events, and where we're trying to peak. So that happens physically and emotionally, and then spiritually with your partner, How do you relate to each other? And then coaches. Financially, you've got pressures. So most women stop because they want to have a family or there's not enough money in women's sport. Now, obviously, we're seeing that change. But in my good old days, the money in women's sport was not a lot. We were really professional beggars and good fundraisers. But I got good at that too, Callum, which I guess helped me in business.
I bet it did. So, and on that, I suppose, what were you able to do that volleyball full time? Because I know I read an article recently about a Melbourne Boomers player in the WNBL, and she's a qualified sports scientist, but she doesn't quite have enough time to do a bit of that. But then she, there was a paramedic who's doing that, then goes to footy training for the AFLW. Like, what was the case for you? Because it's really difficult.
Yeah, it is really a piecemeal approach. So a piece of that and a piece of that and a piece of that. And then you come back to the table at night and see if you've got a wholesome meal, right? And so Kerry and I decided very early on. Now, this is way back in 1994. So wind your clocks back a lot. It's nearly 30 years ago. Oh, wow. Reality catches up to you. But almost 30 years ago, we had to decide. We sat down at the table and we said, do we want to go and get a job at the service station, the coffee shop, the post office, or do we want to try and build our brand, which we didn't really know what brand was back then, but build Cook and Potthast in this dream to go to the Olympics for beach volleyball, which is the first time it was ever in 1996. And of course, by 94, when we joined our partnership, it had been announced that Sydney was going to be the next game. So we had this real opportunity to decide to build a dream and build a story. And what that meant was, and again, back in the day, we wrote newsletters, physically wrote newsletters, typed them out on a typewriter, printed them, photocopied them, put them in envelopes, put stamps on the envelopes and sent them with paper clippings out to prospective sponsors and the current sponsors, sort of telling them about the journey. So we would collect $100 here, $500 here, $1,000 here, $10,000, all the way through to just gather enough money to not only eat but travel internationally. I mean, we're seeing that as one of the biggest costs for our generation right now. To get international experience, it just costs a lot of money.
Amazing. I think we all miss a bit of that analog world with the handwritten notes and the personalisation. I think that's brilliant.
And door knocking, fundraising, knocking on the door going, hi, want to buy a Yatla pie. Now, for those in Queensland, you'll know Yatla is a very famous pie. And that's how I started my career of fundraising.
Amazing where it takes you. It works. It clearly works. So obviously five Olympic Games. When do you know when to stop? Because if you're so obsessive compulsive about all this planning, then all of a sudden one day you wake up. Is it? Well, that's probably the question actually. Do you wake up one day and go, I think that's it, or is it a sort of a build up over time?
Yeah, I think it's a gradual decline in motivation and excitement and passion. And I had planned a year off. I had a forced plan in 2005 to have a year off with a shoulder operation. 2008 was my fourth Olympics in Beijing, and there was a planned year off in 2009 to reassess whether there was another opportunity to go, whether I had the motivation. And you watch it. You literally watch it in your own head with all your thoughts. When you wake up, you're like, oh, I wish I could go to training. That rarely happened, but you just watch the emotion. You watch when people talk about it. You watch when it comes on TV. I watched when people were playing and I was at home. Am I really upset about that? Do I want to get out there? 2009, in my year off, what I did was go from 10 out of 10 intensity and volleyball and practice and discipline to 0. Now, that's the first mistake. If I had my time again, I would have dialed the 10 back to 5. So I'd stayed in the game at some level and stayed in sand with my sand legs, even walking on the beach, even doing a little bit of, didn't have to be volleyball, but gym, something. I went to 0. I'm like, don't want sand in my pants, don't want sand in my toes, don't want sand in my bed. And so to wind that back up, which the reason I wound it back up was I sat in the February 2010, so I'd had all of 9 off, Winter Olympic opening ceremony as a spectator. And I watched the Australian team and all the athletes walk around, and I literally looked up and thought, have I got one more march left in me? Have I got one more march? And then the other side of my brain said, you're a long time retired, give it one more go. So I flew back from Vancouver after watching the Winters. I saw Tora Bright win live the freestyle half pipe. And I thought, I'm going to give it one more crack. The ramp up for 2010 to get back to a level of Olympic standard was painful, to say the least. Painful physically, painful mentally. I remember one specific time where I was hunched over, and my coach got a photo of it, hunched over in the pouring rain with a knee guard on by myself, trying to get my body back in shape. And I never trained in the rain, Callum, ever. Because we are full-time professional athletes, although we fundraised, I could move my training. So if I woke up, looked outside and it was raining, I'd just move it to 10 o'clock from 8 o'clock. We'd wait. We'd go at night time. We'd go indoors. I hated the rain. So I knew that I was committed when I was out there trying to get my body back in shape in 2010. But I probably, to be fair, in hindsight, I overstayed my welcome. I probably should have opted out. But like I said, the thing of long time retired was ringing strongly in my ears.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that. And so what was obviously the Olympic Games and the competition and the chance of winning medals, you know, is sort of like the part of the reason why. But what was like more underneath the surface? What was your why when you got it? What when you days you didn't want to get out of bed, but you did anyway for most of the time, I'd imagine, apart from when it was raining. What was your why personally to do all this work?
Yeah, and it changed every cycle. So, you know, to be part of it, in the beginning, I was an 18-year-old kid when I realised I wanted to go to my first Olympics. Well, I was 8 when I had the dream, but I was 18 when it was somewhat real. So my first games in Atlanta, I was 21, and that was just about, you know, trying to be the best I could be, trying to be the best volleyballer, getting to the Olympics, being a part of that Australian team in the green and gold was like super empowering. And then second round, when we came third, was the first of all home games, Sydney. There's nothing more special than playing an Olympics at home. So that's why Brisbane 2032 is super exciting, because I know what's coming for our Aussies. Once in a lifetime, right? Once in a generation opportunity. I had a friend that won 3 Olympic gold medals in beach volleyball. She won it after me in the US. Never went. She went to 5 Olympics, never went to a home games. So that is super exciting. Then after that, it sort of changed to a new partner. How could I give that experience to a new partner? I did want to write a book and inspire somebody else to follow their dreams. So that was part of why Sydney was special, writing a book, which published 22 years ago called Go Girl. And I still sell copies today, and I still have people tell me that they love that book, The Journey of Bronze to Gold. And then, you know, Nicole and I had injury problems, and I said I'd never want to retire on that. So the purpose for Beijing was to prove to myself that I could get back in there. And here's the kicker, which you had to go through all that to understand why London. Sometimes we think the whys are so big, they have to be big and grand and bold. They don't. They have to be tiny and something important to you. And there was one piece of Olympic uniform. So you can buy replica uniforms that are a little bit different, but there's one piece of uniform that Sportscraft had made for the first time ever, our Olympic opening ceremony jacket, and it had the names of all the Olympic gold medalists inside. And so the only way to get one of those is to be an athlete. And so I even asked, I said, if I don't qualify, I don't go to the London Olympics, can you give me one? And the bloke looked me straight in the eye and said, no, you got to earn it. And so I spent those 3 years of getting myself ready back to go to the Olympics for the jacket, which ultimately I got. So it was a great experience.
I assume you wear it to bed now every night.
I was hanging up there. It is very special. There's another story.
Yeah.
You'll have to see me live on stage to see what happened to the jacket. But it is very special. And now it's in every opening ceremony jacket. So we saw it in Rio. We saw it in Tokyo. And those names, obviously back to Edwin Flack and Dawn Fraser and Betty Cuthbert and Ian Thorpe and Susie O'Neill and Kerry Potters, Kathy Freeman, and myself is in that jacket forever. So that's part of it.
Love that. That's great. Smallest little thing, but, it's very focused, very tangible.
Yep.
So it's easy to get after. That's cool. A great story. One of the big things we're really going to talk about here on this episode is around why athletes are so amazing in business a lot of the time. There's a lot of sort of intangibles there that they've had built up over their careers of playing within teams and leading others, and there's so many pieces to that. But first, before we get into that, a lot of athletes find it really difficult to, and understandably so, transition out of effectively full-time professional career into something else, another vocation, and a lot of that time it is business. You got to, athletes might, depending on the sport, might be wrap up at 30 something. It's a lot of life left and a lot of time to do work. Long time retired, Nat, actually, if you remember that voice, Ned. So how difficult was that for you, the transition out of sport?
Well, fortunately or not, I knew that beach volleyball was never going to pay the bills forever, and I couldn't live off. Well, I thought I couldn't live off that sport or the name, but contrary in hindsight, Kerry and I both managed to be professional speakers and translate that into business and our own business. But at the time, I knew that I had to have a second vocation, a second career. And I thought it was going to be in running beach volleyball centres. I thought everyone would love to play beach volleyball. So I convinced the Queensland government through much lobbying to build a beach volleyball sports centre called Sandstorm here in Brisbane. And so I ran that. I cut my teeth on business and all aspects of business, from HR to accounting to marketing to, wages and payroll and fundraising and sales and all of that. I learned through that business. But of course it didn't pay the bills, and there weren't as many wanting to play beach volleyball as I thought, or I wasn't as good as marketing back then. The costs. I tried radio, I tried letterbox drops, I tried, everything. So that was a business, but what it taught me was priceless in understanding the holistic view of what business is about. And then as a corporate speaker, I continued to share my story, to share the characteristics of success, and also share the sustainable characteristics of success, not just once, but 5 times. To be at the top of the tree and the best in the world is something that, needs a motivation cycle, needs an understanding of the holistic view. And that's something I learned through cutting my teeth in that business.
Brilliant. I think, starting a business is always just an incredible apprenticeship in many ways, and a very real one. There's no sort of, safety or safeguard there, and you just got to figure it out. There's no one else to do it but you.
There's no shortcuts.
For anyone.
There's no shortcuts either, Callum.
No.
And like in beach volleyball, there's 2 of us out there. The coach can't help us. He's not allowed to speak to us. And he used to say to us, he'd go, "No one's coming. You have to sort this out yourself." And the moment, you think, ha, 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 and then you really realize that no one is coming. Now, in business, of course, you can get experts and you can try and get help. But at the end of the day, too, the buck still, if it's your own business, the buck still stops with you. And you have to get on with it. You have to build the motivation. You have to build the energy and passion. And when it, back to one of your other questions, there is a day where you wake up and you go, "I'm done." There might be a month or a year where you're trying to go, "I can do it, I can do it, I can do it," the little train up the hill. And then one day you just let it all go and you're like, "That's it, it's all over."
Yeah. Think I can, I know I can.
Yeah, I'll stuff that.
No, it's all right. I knew what you meant.
Yeah. No, and that's what happens. You do, you go,
yeah.
I know I can, I know I can, no, I can't.
Yeah.
Stuff it, I'm out.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I think and as I said, there's a lot of intangibles that athletes have that are really well suited for business. I mean, you could cover it as I said a second ago. You know, continuous that drive for improvement, discipline, leadership, teamwork. You know, good comms, being competitive. That's all. That all ties in well. What has been really helpful from your beach volleyball career to business, and why do athletes make such good people in business sometimes?
Yeah, well, I think the accountability piece is huge. Like the scoreboard makes you accountable, and you know, business we hear about KPIs and we hear about one-on-one meetings with the boss, but when you go in one-on-one meetings, you can bluff your way through. Like, oh yeah, well, someone else did that wrong, or I'm waiting on this person for that to come in, and so when the whistle blows on September 25th, 2000 at 2:30 in the afternoon, you can't go, hold on, referee, hold on, I haven't quite got everything ready. You are accountable on the spot. You're accountable to your volleyball partner. You're accountable to sponsors and friends and family and everyone that signed up to this journey. And there's an end date. There really is a performance date. So in business, your business plans, they look great. They're glossy. You can get someone to make them even three-dimensional and come to life, and a great video presentation. But at the end of the day, you have to deliver, whether it's the bottom line, whether it's a number of new customers, and you can't hide from that when you're a sports person. So that, I think, is really important, and we take critical feedback every day. We don't wait for a monthly meeting in sport. It's like every action, every end of every training, end of a tournament, there is constant feedback and might be considered by most as criticism on how to make it better. And our guiding principle question was, how do we make it better? So actually the stuff you do all day, every day that some people would think would be awesome is just the norm, and we're trying to make it better. And I think that's what, when an athlete takes that across the business, it can go to the next level.
Love that. I think the feedback one's important too, because, you know, people dread the monthly review or whatever, you know, and then obviously sometimes don't take feedback on board as well as they should. What's the advice there, I suppose, when, you know, you've probably got more feedback than most people in your life, so you're probably an expert. You know, how do you do it without going, oh, just give me a break, you know, or just getting a bit annoyed about it when really it's actually coming from a good place to try and improve us?
Yeah, and we often ask ourselves, are we coachable? Can we be coachable? So we sort of change that little bit to, how do I learn? So imagine I've got a 7-year-old daughter, Jordan. She's at school in grade 2. You know, I did her maths homework on the weekend with her, and she's not coachable, right? They don't want to. They get upset when it's too hard, and so training and adults. So if adults have that mindset, how do you be more coachable? So that's the first question to literally ask yourself. How do I be more coachable, which is absorb the information, actually go, you know what, could I improve there? How would I improve there? And can I take a step towards that improvement? So I guarantee the human beings are not there to make your life hard. They're trying to get an outcome. And so sometimes people don't deliver the message quite how we want to hear it. So that's when you're in battle, and the highest form of this is obviously the army defending the country, and it's war and life and death is on the line, right? So they used to teach us, and they said it a bit more colourfully, so I'll paraphrase it, that you got to take the emotion out. So when there's feedback and when you're being coachable, you're like, okay, I'm going to look at that objectively. I'm going to have a review how I can make that better. And then I'm going to go and have a go at it. Right. So that I think is really important. And the emotion, when you overlay emotion, that's when we all get upset. So try not to take it personally. I know, and it's a practice. It's not a once off. It's a practice, and it's a practice being coachable as well. So be coachable. It's not personal. Get the emotion out of it.
That's good. That's a billboard, I reckon.
Yeah.
For sure. Bumper sticker.
Bumper sticker.
And for sure. What about leadership? So I imagine there's, even though on a beach volleyball, oh God,
Court.
What do you call it at? A court. It is a court still. Beach. Yep. I was going to say beach volleyball beach, but that's wrong. On the court, would you, even though you've got one other person you're really sort of accountable for, in business you might have a lot. Does it change in terms of the leadership styles from only have one person, or roughly you'll have a team behind you and your coach, and in some degrees you're accountable for them too. In business, you might have a lot more, but where's the crossover there between business and sports from a leadership aspect?
Well, even if you're leading 10,000 people in a big organization, you ultimately have an executive leadership team. So that becomes a smaller unit, which is what Kerry and I had. We had, at our peak, we had 3 full-time staff. We had a success coach for our mind. We had our volleyball coach, Steve, and we had a strength and conditioning trainer, and he also did everything else. So we called him Jack of all trades. He'd even get sandwiches and do them. He taught himself how to do the massage, and because you can't afford a big team, there's only 2 of you, right? And the budgets weren't quite the same as footy teams. So you do have to lead yourself. So this is important. I think it's a part we miss in business. You have to lead from the inside out. You've got to lead yourself first. So how you show up and how you do anything is how you're perceived by your staff, team, friends, family. And even through silence, you're leading, right? You lead all the time. People are watching. Then you've got to lead your partner, my volleyball partner, at times. And then we would swap leadership depending on the pressure situation. So there were times where I was under extreme pressure, physically, mentally, strategically, and then it'd flick to Kerry and we'd have to switch the leadership, right? So it depended on who they served and the strategy. Then I had to lead the team. Like sometimes the coach wouldn't show up on time to practice. He wouldn't show up to the plane on time. And that was just part of he was a genius on the court, off the court, not so much, but we loved him to death. So it does take this understanding. And then there's another perspective, which I learned through reading books. I read a lot of books. Now the next generation's in Audible and listening to them, but I encourage you to read other people's stories or listen. You can lead from the front, which I tend to do through my voice and my posture and my action, and leaders go first, which is a mantra I learned. You can lead from the middle, which is just sort of like a mother hen, making sure everyone's taken care of. And you can lead from the back, like a good shepherd and their flock of sheep, and making sure you're sort of, giving that energy, you're gently poking them with their, what's the shepherd's staff?
Staff. Yeah.
The staff, right? Come on, sheep, this way, this way. And so all of those leadership styles are important at different times, because sometimes I've led from the front and I've turned around and no one's following. I'm like, I'm off on the front. I'm like, go this way. I'm off on the front. Yeah, cutting through the grass, and then they're all back there sitting under the tree having a rest. I'm like, this isn't working.
Yeah.
So, I mean, flexibility and adaptability and the capacity to read the room, that is really, really important.
You mentioned in your team, you had a success coach. Was that a bit like or just from what you said around making sure you're setting goals and that sort of off that mind, almost like is it like a mindset coach? Is that what it was?
Yeah, absolutely. Like Ben Crow is to Ash Barty.
Oh yeah, we love that. But that's kind of what I was saying. It's certainly in vogue now, but that feels really early.
Yes.
Was that sort of, were you sort of pioneering that sort of, that's essential in any team now, or someone's an athlete's staff? Was that quite new at the time?
Yeah, we were way ahead of our time to have that person on team. Fortunately, and again, a whole nother story we don't have time for, he did it for free in the beginning. Because we got very good at convincing people to do stuff for free because we had no money, right? Yeah. We sort of sold him on the dream that you help us get famous, we'll help you get famous. And so that's how, when I say famous, that's wrapped up in winning and being the best brand and the best people. So the Ash Barty philosophy of how do you become a whole and complete person and happier and that's going to create a better athlete, right? That's what he was working on with us. It wasn't traditional sports psychology. So it's a very different take. If anyone knows of Anthony Robbins or Tony Robbins and the godfather of personal development, it was more on that. We were fire walking, glass walking, parachuting, rock climbing, blindfolded, riding a bike blindfolded. We were doing all of this sort of Luke Skywalker stuff. And I'm a big Star Wars fan. So hence our blindfolded rock climbing was that scene in Star Wars or Empire Strikes Back where he's got his helmet on trying to hit with his lightsaber, the little thing. So that I took a lot from movies, Superman, superhero archetypes, Rocky, being in Rocky movies, watching those. So that's what we did back then. And so the success.
Were you ever in the butcher shop just like smashing up the meat and stuff?
No, I couldn't handle the smell. I couldn't handle the smell of the abattoir. No, I chased a chicken though. Chase a chicken. So yeah, it's I wouldn't like to come up against Ivan Drago or Creed, but we just thankfully we got a net and we're non-contact. But we took a lot of inspiration from that, and I think Keurig would come. He was our success coach, Keurig Ashley. He would come to the court. He would stand on he would be the shepherd. He'd stand on the side of the court. When we dropped our shoulders, he would whack us in the middle of the back and say, stand up. And he would make us cheer when we hit the ball out so that we would confuse our brain as to whether we were winning or losing. Because ultimately, if you're losing and you shrug your shoulders and slouch, it's very difficult to have a best physical performance from that position. So I now tell the young kids on court, I say to them, I want to arrive at any time during a match, look at the match and look at you and not look at the scoreboard and think you're winning. You have to show me through your body language that you are winning, because that's the best spot to win from.
Yeah, I mean, volleyball is such a momentum game too because of the way it's scored and the roles you get on. And so I think that those in-between moments are just as important as the actual match play itself.
Great observation, gaps. Callum. Look at you. It is the gaps. But if you look at Usain Bolt and you watch him strut around and his movement, like he was never going to lose, right? And the 100-meter freestylers, Kyle Chalmers, same thing. They're trying to do all of their pre-ritual scare tactics. Like we were trying to do that in volleyball too. So it's an interesting addition to learning about yourself and the game. Yeah,
no doubt. You got to take on a character almost and just become that, and then away you go. It's sort of a out-of-body experience. So there's some really cool stuff there. I mean, we've covered a bit of leadership. We've covered some improvement, some discipline there. What about being competitive? Nat, you strike me as a pretty competitive individual. Do you get wireline fever? Do you have that?
Yeah, I mean, the thing I miss now is the whistle blowing, the scoreboard ticking over, the arm wrestle of the competition. But I play a lot of corporate golf now, and so when I stand up to tee off in the Pro-Am or the PGA with Adam Scott standing there, I'm like, this is what I'm made for, right? You've got to slow your breathing. I'm not a good golfer, like good, but I know how to play. And so, but when you're in front of Adam Scott or Cam Smith and they're watching, it's next level, like body shake. To be able to perform under that type of pressure, that's what I like to do. But it can be, I mean, to be fair, Callum, I should be honest, it's even in Junior Pictionary, it's in Monopoly Deal when I'm playing against my 7-year-old. I
could have picked this. I could have.
Yes.
And we've found all these great parallels with sport and business. Imagine in your experience post-sport, have you ever come across a time where it hasn't translated all that well, or it isn't appropriate, or maybe it is, it just they weren't quite ready for it?
Yeah, well, and again, I mentioned earlier, read the room. So when it's a new room, right, and you're reading for the first time and you think your competitive nature and you think winning is what everyone wants to see, and then it just sometimes shows the gap of what they're not doing, right? And they're like, oh, no, that makes me look bad. So it does get a bit awkward. So sometimes going out, leaders go first, go strong, is not the right thing in that room. And it's allowing, and I had to learn through my career, allowing others to have that opportunity to go first, because I had a mantra of go first, be first, go first, right? And then that denies other people the chance that are maybe teetering on the bravery to do that. So I then had to learn to stand back a little bit, to be in the middle, to be at the back, and let some other people have their opportunity to go first. Now, if they don't, then I try and, come on, Justin, you have a crack, right? So, Callum, It's your turn. Surely it's your turn to go first, Callum.
Yep.
So, I try to make it humorous. I try to have a little bit of sarcasm, which is not falling as good as it used to. So that's evolution in the new generation too, not understanding sarcasm. So you got to read the room on that. And Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, Adelaide are different environments. Americans, different environments too. So, I've spoken in New York for some big companies, and you just have to understand, American jokes probably not a good thing over there.
No, got to tread a little bit more carefully there. That's right. They probably expect it from us to be fair.
Yeah, that's right. It's been fertile soil, because we've had enough go before us to have the Australian way represented.
Yeah. Thanks, Paul Hogan.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Really good stuff there. And I think you're right about not always having to lead from the front. I think, servant leadership where, you're there to, serve others is just sort of your main role, and really lift them up is really important. They need coercing sometimes, and you do it. But, if you give them space to lead and lead themselves, I think that's just as important as come with me stick.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm learning that, every day with my 7-year-old, right? I'd much rather do her maths homework, and put it and get on with it. But we're teaching her then, and so that helps me then with my child, and those that have children will understand in the business world as well. It's quite, that's that coachableness, right? And learning in every situation. I approach the world with everyone I run into has something to teach me or I can learn from. Doesn't mean I choose to every time, because, that can get overwhelming too. But I do have that understanding that everyone's got their own story, and they can impart knowledge, and it's whether or not I want to take it and run with it.
For sure. And I think you touched on a second ago around the new generations, probably a pretty good segue into the question around whether you've worked with a lot of new younger athletes. Are they different to you, the way you approach the game, and how there's other things, external things, right, that are totally the world's different, but is the way they attack it, and your understanding of that, how different is it? How difficult is it?
Yeah, I really think it is different. I mean, when Facebook came in, social media and Instagram, sometimes that is a challenge and difficult for me to understand. My career finished as it was beginning. And it seems to, the Twitter lifestyle right now is headline. And so I feel like then if some of the athletes that want to go a few layers deeper and really try and understand the game or their sport, Kerry and I would study the game. We would study the flight of the ball. We would study the physics on the rotation on the ball and the wind and the directions. Our volleyball court moved from 9 meters to 8 meters halfway through my career. So you had to understand what losing a square meter did to the game, right? And I was a math student. I love that as well. But you've got to have that passion to understand momentum. What is the definition of momentum? How do you win it? How do you lose it? Where can you influence it? And I think what I'm seeing is more of just hit ball over net, right? Simplicity of just hit the ball. No. You're going to do that a million times in your career. You really want to understand why and where and how, the Simon Sinek golden circles, to make everyone the best it can be. So I think there's a little bit of that. They're getting, recoveries, science is better, that they're stronger. They're getting stronger in the gym. They're using technology to measure. We didn't measure, right? heart rate monitor was the best we had, and I'd avoid that because it was uncomfortable with sand and all of that. So, we were subjectively measuring. So now we can objectively measure. I think that's going to help performance. But yeah, they get distracted. I think there's the ability to focus was one of the things we had. And I think there's a lot of distraction out there. So any athletes that can cut through that and increase their focus, concentration, will be the better athletes.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's lots of noise.
But nothing's wrong, right? It's not wrong. It's just different.
Yeah.
And it's how do I understand that? And I do a lot of work with Natalie Cook OAM, the first ever Indigenous beach volleyballer to win a medal in Tokyo, and her partner, Maria Fay. And, I don't talk to them about volleyball at all. I talk to them about managing their emotions, managing their relationship. And that's probably the most important.
Yeah, for sure. Really interesting. A few more to go, Nat. Specifically on your role ahead of Brisbane 2032, you mentioned how much of a big deal it is for a player to be able to play in there in a home games. Pretty special. You've got a different role coming up. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm very fortunate to be appointed to the board of Brisbane 2032, which is effectively the board of the organising committee for the Olympics and Paralympics. And it's a 4-year term in the first round. So we go through to the middle of 2026, we're starting with a blank sheet of paper, right? So it's really exciting. It's a big board. There are 22 of us. 6 of those are politicians, state, local, federal. And the John Coates as the vice president of the International Olympic Committee. We've got Paralympics Australia, the Australian Olympic Committee, and then we've got sort of experts. We've got athlete representatives, of which I do, but I'm not officially in that role. And then representative of the community, business and Indigenous, and it's really an exciting committee. Now, it needs a lot of people because there's a lot to be done. The blank piece of paper is because you usually only get awarded a game 7 years out, and we were at 10. So we really had a 3-year vortex of what do we do now? So interestingly, we've broken it into a 3. This is why maths is important, Callum. 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 1. The 1 year is really games time. But this first 3 years is around stakeholder engagement, stakeholder management, understanding that it's an inclusive games for everybody. Everyone can have their say, remembering, though, that not everyone wins a medal. So you can have your say, but whether or not it gets up. So in March this year, in 2023, we're having a legacy summit for Queensland to see what happens there. And it's really great to be a part of with Andrew Liveris as the chairman of the board. He's got great international experience, and I'm learning on my feet. It's awesome.
Probably enjoying working in those cycles you love so much again.
Absolutely. That's right. Numbers.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's good.
22 members. How do you stay organised? I was just thinking, that's a lot of people, people at one table.
Yeah, well, that's why the chairman's important, and he's got a lot of experience there. And then the committee. So what's interesting about board level is, there's finance and audit, there's people in remunerations, there's marketing, there's all of these, the athlete village, there's sustainability, there's First Nations. And by the time we're not into all those committees yet, but that's how you sort of focus. If we look at not getting distracted, we focus people's attention, not only the ones that they're passionate and good at that sphere, but how do we add a diverse voice, a different voice, so that we get to make sure we've got a 360 look. And that'll be rolling out. I mean, this is our second year right now, and our next meeting is very soon. So I'm enjoying the process, and I'm there ultimately to continue to fight for the athlete. The athlete's at the heart of the games, and make sure it's the best, not only experience for the athlete, but how do we build more robust pathways to make sure there's sustainability for an Olympic and Paralympic athlete into the future.
Fantastic. It's going to be here before you know. I know it sounds like a long way away, but it will be here quickly. The You mentioned, again, in our little Google research that the team and I did, saw that, you mentioned around how different it is being on a board as opposed to being, more operational within an organisation. And that might have come on the back of, you doing your Australian Institute of Company Directors course. How's it different for you? What's been the major ones?
Yeah, it's really challenging actually, because when you're an athlete, you're the one in the game, and then when you have business, you roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty as a jack of all trades, from the CEO to the cleaner. Jack comes back in, but in a board, the most important part is the strategic oversight and stewarding those employed. So the CEO is a lady by the name of Cindy Hook. She's just started. And so it'll be our first board meeting where we've actually got the official structure, board and a CEO reporting to the board. Up until now, we've actually had our hands dirty a little bit. We get invited to everything, which is awesome, because people want to be able to have their say and talk to us about their aspirations for why Brisbane 2032 is important to them, from schools to businesses to sporting clubs. So main difference now moving forward will be stakeholder engagement, continuing to be an advocate and a voice, and looking at the strategic planning, managing the risks of expectation. That's a big one. Managing understanding the financials of a $5 billion event. So that, usually I talk in $5 and 50,000s. So adding a few zeros to that is going to make it really interesting. But watching it all unfold and being part of the leadership group I'm very, very honoured.
Amazing. Can't wait to see you guys come up with. I've got one last question for you, Nat. What is more nerve-wracking, teeing off in front of Adam Scott or serving in your first Olympic Games, your first serve of your first Olympic Games in Atlanta?
Oh, it has to be my first serve. My first serve, my first Olympics in Atlanta. Although you do know you've got a 40-minute window, so the first serve's not probably as scary. I might have to review that, because it was pretty scary with Adam Scott. My knees were shaking, although I was trying not to show that. But when you're Olympic gold medal time, Bondi Beach, Kerry's back to serve. We've got match point against the best team. They were the best team in the world at the time. We had a different piece of paper. We had a different plan. We shook it up. We were a surprise. We had a strong belief. Keurig built that in us. But I can still remember viscerally, and I'm getting goosebumps now talking about it, standing there with Kerry back to serve, and she was the best server in the world. So this thing could have hit me, but she had no control over where it was going. So it could have hit me in the back of the head. It could have hit the spectator, or it could have been a point. And, just to pull that off was the greatest moment of my life, and I'll never, ever forget it.
What a great way to finish, Nat. That was amazing. Thanks so much for the insights. I think everyone's going to get a lot of gold out of that one. So, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and I know it's only, for those listening, you're only listening on a recording, but I'm going to show my Olympic gold medal right now if you're watching any of the little clips. So it really is worth it, and I never leave home. Well, it never leaves home without me. So there you go. Do
you give it a little bite before you go out every day just to check? Has it got marks on it?
It does have marks. I do a little polish like a genie lamp, and I think, what's coming out? What are my 3 wishes today? And it's pretty special time.
I assume one of these is to get through this podcast unscathed, and I think that's one wish down.
High five. Thanks for having me, Callum. I have really enjoyed it.
No worries. See you later.
Bye.